My objective today is to show you some tips about using tarps, some common mistakes that get made, and some ways to cure those things to make your tarp work better for you and allow you to be able to be more successful in your setup. Hey, Perry Peacock here with Wilderness Innovation, and I'm up here, finally got up top of the mountains above my house, above our shop. Up here about 10,400 feet today. Still got some snow on the east and north facing slopes here, but this is a nice spot right here on the ridge. It's in a little grove of trees. Most of this ridge area and most of this face is just grass and low brush, but this little grove of trees allows me a spot to set up my tarp, and it actually stops most of the wind that's coming through. The wind is, 15-20 miles an hour typically up through here. Right, so what I've done here is I've got a setup that is basically an A-frame. I've staked the back wall down. You can see the afternoon, evening sun shining through somewhat in the back there. And instead of leaving this end down, I wanted to raise it up. This is one of my favorite styles of setup, is the A-frame with one edge lifted. Alright, so what I've done here is we just came from the opposite side over there, and that's where I had that pole up. So that's the high point on the tarp on this edge out here, and everything slopes either off that way or it slopes back this way. And I've used a midi clip right here to give myself a little bit different tie out point, and my goal here is just to have a low point, and that way any water that collects up here can come down and run off this way harmlessly off to the ground and out and down the slope. One of the things you want to try not to do with a tarp, or even a tent for that matter, but tents are usually constructed that way so you don't have to think about it, is you don't want to get anywhere on your tarp setup where you're allowing water to stand. Because if I get, even this right here, I probably would end up anchoring this thing, tying it off a little lower to pull down more. If you get some water in here, or you get some water up there, and say you get a quart of water or whatever, it makes a little bowl in there. Well, that bowl attracts more water, and pretty soon it gets bigger and bigger. And you can get to the point where you collapse your setup because your trees or your lines or whatever can't hold all the weight. Because on a tarp this size, you could get hundreds of pounds of water in there. You don't want to be holding water. You want the water to shed off and not build up. Alright, now here we have the backside. This is the side the wind is pushing against. You can see it pushing on it here. This is very steep. Even if I had a tarp that wasn't sealed very good, or wasn't very waterproof or water resistant, if it had gotten very old and didn't work very well anymore, a setup with a steepness like this would likely shed virtually all the water anyway, and anything that did come through it so steep on the inside, it would want to just run down the inside of the fabric to the bottom. So steepness is an important factor, and you want to have typically somewhere around 60 degrees or so of pitch. And typically they used to tell us in the Boy Scouts, if you get a salute here, you got about a 45 degree here. So you want to go up, higher than that. And I don't know what we are here. We're probably somewhere at about a 60 or something right here. This type of setup right here is going to maximize the water shedding capability of any tarp you use. Even if you used a bed sheet, this would help keep water off of you by having a steep pitch like this. Okay? So we have a steep pitch. A lot of times, many times, you see pictures on the internet of people that have made shelters, and they got an angle like this. Now you got an angle like that. If you put a tarp over it, that tarp is going to be puddling up water in puddles all over the place, then you got a chance of it leaking, or you have a chance of overstressing everything because you're collecting 50, 100 pounds of water or more on top of your roof of your shelter. All right, something else I'm going to show you right here is on this tarp. Our tarps come with 6 tent stakes, ABS, practically unbreakable, and they come with shock cord through the top of the tent stake that can be used in a couple different strength settings. This is the maximum strength setting where it's doubled over. But the nice thing about this, I've got a steady wind pushing on this tarp. Well, when you get those wind gusts and everything, this thing can stretch, which helps your tarp to remain taut in the weather conditions, and not so you don't have to come out and keep tightening things down, all that sort of thing. So I've got this used on this back side, so as the wind pushes on it, see, it can stretch. And so that's a kind of that can be an important thing. I don't always use the shock cord on there. Sometimes I go straight through with the tent stake, but oftentimes, especially if it's windy and stuff like that, oftentimes I'll do something like this so I can maintain some tension on my tarp in the wind. All right, now something else to show you here. Oftentimes I see people pitch a tarp that's something like this. It's got a little bit of slope, but not that much to it. Now you see what happens here as it rains. You see we wind up collecting water. We wind up with a spot in here, and that's not leaking, but it could if we got more water in there, or if the tarp develops some kind of problem, or if the tarp does not accept much water pressure. You can see right there, so that water is in there. Now I can do all kinds of things on this, but you see that water is just going to sit there. All right, so if I put this pole back inside of here, you'll notice this pole, I don't know if I showed you this. This is the tent stake bag that comes that comes with your tarp. All of our tarps come with that. This is one of 3 shock cord assemblies that come with a cord lock, a shock cord loop. So I just put this over a stick. It's got Velcro here. This tab right here, underneath all the tabs, tie-out tabs in the middle section of the tarp, underneath there is another Velcro, mating Velcro to this. So I can stick this up in there. I don't have to tie it off any kind of way. I just put it in there, stick the Velcros together. You can hear that. That's got a big enough patch of Velcro that'll stick on there really nicely. So now as I raise this up, you see it's making that water want to go somewhere else. And as I tension up the cord, that water is gone. Okay, so now on this other side of the tarp, I create a low point by the way I've tied that off, and wherever water wants to go in here, it wants to run off of there. So I've created an easy way for water to run off that into the tarp. So that's one of the things I've done is a lot of people just put up tarps, they just string it up and don't think about it. But you've got to think about how water will run off. You got to think about how steep the pitch needs to be. You got to be looking for spots that may tend to trap some water and start it puddling and pooling on you. To summarize our little deal today, one of the tips is to pitch your tarp steep enough so you get good water shedding abilities. Where you're not pitched as steep, you want to make sure that you do something that makes the water want to channel off of your tarp. And just think about, I've got a high spot on this side and I'm low on that side. So you don't have to put up a tarp so that everything is even all the way across. The other thing is the shock corded tent stakes, which can be very handy for maintaining tension in the wind, and using a pole like this sort of thing to some interior locations like I've done here to create a high point. So I can create a high point. My ridge line's right here, so I can create a high point that's actually away from my ridge line, and it's even away from my tie out line here. So I can create a high point somewhere else by using a pole such as this. And so that's another thing, good tight ridge line. And then I've pitched, I know the area here, and I know the storms tend to swirl in from this direction back here, and this is in fact a prevailing wind. All the trees actually lean pretty much in the direction that I've got my tarp, my tarp here. The trees are leaning this direction because the wind just virtually always blows this direction. So I'm kind of trying to shield myself in that way as well. So Perry Peacock with Wilderness Innovation, just with several tarp tips that are intended to help you make your tarp setups be more effective. Keep yourself drier, keep yourself better protected, and make a tent pitch that works better for you.